I want to welcome you this morning to Honor Chapel. It is our custom every year at Ozark to take one of our final chapels to show honor to whom honor is due. Our scholarship winners were mentioned earlier, our Dally Evangelism Award winner. It's also an occasion for us to honor our graduating class. We recognize many of you may not be able to stay for the baccalaureate or the commencement. And so right now, if you are a member of the class of 2016, if you'll be graduating, would you go ahead and stand to your feet right now? Let's recognize these folks. We are grateful for every one of these soon-to-be graduates. Now, in our Honor Chapel, we also express our appreciation every year to those who are departing from us. And I'll mention a few of those folks right now. At last night's athletic banquet here on campus, Coach Lamb honored two of our coaches who are concluding their time here. Tab Hall has led our women's basketball team with competence and with class, and I believe that Tab is here today. Tab, would you just stand? Would you join me right now in expressing your appreciation to Tab? Last night, we also honored Tony Almaslecker for his 9 years as our women's volleyball coach. We have all thrilled to see the volleyball team's success on the court. He's done a great job as coach. 6 national tournament appearances, 4 Final Fours, 2 national runners-up. But what we have appreciated most about Tony is that he has helped mold our young ladies closer to the image of Christ. And we are grateful for Tab and for Tony's leadership here in our athletic area. Now, this year, we are also saying goodbye to some of our professors. I want to begin by mentioning 2 part-time professors and then 2 full-time professors. Now, these 4 folks that I'm about ready to mention all have wanted to avoid the spotlight today. And they said, hey, we are grateful for the personal words of appreciation that folks have shared with us, but they asked to not have lots said about them here in this chapel or to be called to the stage. And so I'm going to honor that request. But I do want to say just a few words about these 4 people. For the past 10 years, Joy Stafford has led our TESOL program, teaching English to speakers of other languages. She has led that TESOL program with excellence. If you know Joy, you know that she has a great heart for ministry to internationals, and she has passed that on to her students, and she has equipped them to teach with great effectiveness, to teach English words, but also to teach God's word. And we are grateful for Joy. For the past 34 years, Ron Skaggs has taught history and creation science here at Ozark. And for those 34 years, he has helped students understand the world in which we live, to see God's hand at work in history that lies behind us, and to see God's hand at work in creation all around us. And we are grateful for Ron Skaggs' teaching ministry here. Now, since 2001, Scott and Carla Hanley have been a central part of the Ozark family. Carla, of course, has taught piano, and she's also taught English grammar. And she has reminded our students that things like subject and verb agreement matter, that sentence structure matters, that commas matter. There's a big difference between let's eat, comma, grandma, and let's eat, grandma. And because of her teaching, she has helped our students not only study the grammar of God's word more accurately, but also communicate the truth of God's word more accurately, and we are grateful for Carla. Meanwhile, next to her, there in the basement of the chapel, Scott Handley has led our music department for these last 15 years. And in that role, he has helped produce something, I was trying to count them up, 23, 24 different productions, spring musicals, living Christmas trees, big events here on campus that have literally blessed thousands and thousands of people. And he's poured himself every summer into our high school choir camp, highest praise, but he has most especially poured himself into the next generation of worship leaders here. And he has held high the bar for musical excellence. And if you know Scott, you know that at the end of the day, he has a heart for Christ-centered worship and for Christ-centered worship leaders. And we are grateful for Carla and for Scott Handley and their ministry here. And I hope that when you see these four people in passing, perhaps here on campus, Joy and Ron and Carla and Scott, that you will just express a personal word of thanks for their ministry here. And even though I promised I would not call them to the stage, I am going to ask you right now to join me in just expressing your appreciation for these four faithful servants. Would you do that? Now, the final person that I want to mention in today's honor chapel is Mary Alice Gardner. And when I asked her if we could include her in today's honor chapel, she said yes. She said yes, because that will help draw attention to deaf ministry, which, as you know, is her great passion. And she also said yes, because on the personality color code, she said, I'm a yellow and I love parties. Yes, let's have a party. And so have a party we shall. And I want to begin with just a few words myself of appreciation for Mary Alice. Mary Alice's ministry here at Ozark has been long, and it has been deep, and it has been wide. It's certainly been long. She has been here since 1999, so for 17 years. She has been leading our deaf ministry department. Long ministry, but also a deep ministry, because I can tell you, and I mean this, no one cares more deeply about her students or more passionately about her program and her mission here than Mary Alice. This is not just a job for her. This is a calling. You have probably heard her talk about this before, that the deaf community around the world is one of the largest unreached people groups. And Mary Alice's heart breaks to reach them with the gospel. And so she has not only used her hands to point people to Jesus, she has used her very life. She's given 100% of herself to this work. And her ministry here has been done with deep, deep commitment. But not only has her ministry been deep, it has been wide. After 17 years, she has sent out students to leave this place and serve literally around the country and around the world. I could share many stories, but I'll just share one. I got an email about a week ago from one of Mary Alice's former students, Michelle Zuniga. Founded a ministry in Matamoros, Mexico, to deaf young people there. And the name of this ministry is Con Mis Manos, With My Hands Deaf Ministry. And just as an example of her worldwide influence, I want to read to you just an excerpt from Michelle's email. Michelle says this: the existence of the ministry I currently serve with is directly a result of Mary Alice. She said, my very first mission trip was a week of evangelism trip my senior year at OCC, organized by Mary Alice. And we joke at the ministry now, years later, that Con Mis Manos Deaf Ministry is 50% God's fault and 50% Mary Alice's fault. She said, I have the privilege of serving alongside of deaf teens and adults who are now baptized believers, thanks to the ministry that God established after Mary Alice took me on that trip in 2001. She says, I just learned of this honor chapel, and even though I won't be able to make the trip to Joplin, I was wondering if I may humbly ask that a mention be made of the many lives of deaf children and teens and adults in Matamoros, Mexico, be included to honor Mary Alice. I know these deaf brothers and sisters are not able to honor Mary Alice in person at OCC as her time draws to a close, but she has left her imprint on a community far away from Joplin. Deaf children and teens who were once abused, cast away, and isolated now stand with Christ, and they stand with me to honor Mary Alice's work at OCC and the far-reaching effects that the deaf ministry has had throughout the world. Her ministry has been long, and it has been deep, and it has been wide, and we are so grateful for Mary Alice. Now, I've invited two special folks today to come and share some words of appreciation about Mary Alice. Bethany Linebaugh is an Ozark grad, one of Mary Alice's former students, and she now works in a local school system. She's going to come in just a moment and share some words. And then after Bethany shares, I've asked Chad Entiger, who Chad himself is deaf. He's part of the deaf community, but he's also head of the Deaf Missions Ministry, which has been a great partner for us through the years in Council Bluffs, Iowa. And so Chad will come and he will share some words with Bethany interpreting for us. And so would you welcome right now to the stage Bethany Linebaugh.
When I was a sophomore in high school, I went to what was then known as the National Missionary Convention. You might know it as ICOM. When I was there, Dwayne Keene was teaching a class on sign language, and I went to it and I fell in love with sign language. And I then spent the rest of my time at the National Missionary Convention always watching the interpreters, any chance I got. My senior year of high school, I was here on campus for Deeper Life, and my mom was the youth sponsor. They let me always sit to where I could see the interpreters because I was interested in that and was planning on coming to Ozark. After one of the services got done with, my mom said, well, let's go talk to Mary Alice. I said, no, I couldn't do that. I was too afraid to go up and talk to her. So my mom went and talked, and she told her all about me, and she said she was going to love me and all this. Well, my mom comes back, and I'm, of course, getting like kindergarten flashbacks. My mom comes back, and she says, oh, your new teacher's amazing. You're going to love her. Mom was right. I could tell you all of the amazing things that I've done with Mary Alice, all the trips, which almost always meant that we were lost. Yeah, almost always. I could tell you about the time that she and I, after I graduated, walked across the border into Tijuana and met a man that was a friend of a friend. It was crazy, but he got us where we needed to go, even though I didn't speak any Spanish and he didn't speak any English, but it worked out. I could tell you about all the times that we went places and we were late because somebody is always late in her life. I'm not going to say who that is, but somebody's always late. I could tell you about all those times. I could tell you about how much I laugh when I'm with Mary Alice and how so funny she is. Most of the time, even on purpose. Not always. I could tell you all these things, but we're not here to honor Mary Alice for her humor. We're here to honor her for her heart. Mary Alice has a heart for deaf ministry, and she has a heart for her students. So many times I have seen her heart filled with joy because a member of the deaf community got married, or one of her students got married, or birth of children, or new ministries started up, like Con Mis Manos. But I have also seen her heart break. I've seen it break where there's a conflict, either with students or with deaf community or anyone, and she feels a need for peace, and she just wants harmony restored. I've seen her heart break. I've seen her in anguish over wayward students who are not following Christ like they should. I have seen her heart filled with joy and filled with sadness, because that's what ministry is. As many of you know, and all of you will find out, ministry is hard. And Mary Alice has shown us what it's like to minister to the deaf community and to each other. In the classroom, she's taught us sign language and deaf culture, but in our lives, she has taught us how to minister and how to love people. Mary Alice, you have been an amazing teacher and a true friend, and Mom was right. I love you. Good morning. Oh, there we go. Good. Thank you, Bethany, for voicing for me. Her voice is much prettier than mine. Really, we at Deaf Missions really enjoy our working relationship with Ozark over these many years. We are honored to train some of your ministry students during our extension program that we host every year. Also, we've had some of the students come for an internship at our deaf ministry. So thank you so much. We also really love and appreciate Mary Alice. My wife graduated from Ozark. Her name is Glory. And I'm here to tell you she is glorious. She is definitely my better half. I got the better end of the deal. My wife went shopping recently to try to find a gift for Mary Alice. Something that would match her appropriately and just show our appreciation to her. We found this. We have this map for several reasons why we think that it matches Mary Alice. When we went shopping, it got our attention. The colors and the radiance of it. And that's Mary Alice. As your president said, her life is a party. She attracts people. People always notice Mary Alice. And that's because her first love is Jesus. And she wants to serve him. The other thing I like about this map is it's not just a poster. It can be used. It's on corkboard. So you can use it for a variety of reasons. As you know, Mary Alice is not just a teacher here. She's also an interpreter, and she's a dear friend. And she's an advocate for deaf people. And we thank her for that. Other reason why I like this, you can see the world. That shows Mary Alice's impact. She's impacted people here at the United States, and she's also impacted the world as she travels. And now she is impacting through her students. I know of students that serve around the United States and in many different countries of the world, like Mexico, like Mr. Proctor said, and in Haiti, and in Colombia, and India, and many other countries. And her students impact deaf people through preaching, through teaching, and through interpreting. Really, we have an international ministry with deaf people around the world. So thank you from deaf people and from your students and from people involved in deaf ministry. We want to say thank you, Mary Alice. Thank you so very much. I would like to applaud, but wait, don't do it yet. We don't clap like that. I'm going to show you the deaf way of applauding. Okay, ready? Put your hands up. Yeah.
Thank you, Chad. We have actually several guests with us today for this honor chapel for Mary Alice, several members of her family, including her parents, and several folks from the deaf community and from the Deaf Mission Ministry. And so just for those of us who are hearing, why don't you go ahead and applaud them as well? Would you welcome them? Thank you. Today, we are going to have a special reception at the Maybe Student Center from 1 to 3. And so if you would like to come and just express a word of appreciation to Mary Alice, it's kind of a come and go event. So come between 1 and 3 over in the stew, get some cake, get some cookies, and just express your gratitude for Mary Alice's ministry here. Now before, I'm going to call her to the stage here in just a minute, but before I do, I'm not as good as Chad here, but I want us to say two things to Mary Alice. And here's the first one. All right. The first one is this. It's going, and watch these signs. I want you to do this. It's good job. All right. We're going to do it again. Good job. All right. Everybody together. Here we go. 1, 2, 3. Good job. And then this one's real simple. And you do this towards Mary Alice. Thank you. Thank you. Would you express your appreciation as she comes to this stage? Miss Mary Alice, first of all, we have some beautiful flowers. I want Miss Kathy to give you those. And then I have a plaque here I want to give you, and let me read for these folks what the plaque says. It says, "To Mary Alice Gardner, in gratitude for your 17 years of service as professor of deaf communications at Ozark Christian College, your advocacy for the deaf community, your heart for evangelism among the deaf worldwide, your commitment to excellence in teaching, and your personal investment in your students are greatly appreciated. Thank you for training the next generation of men and women for Christian service." Matthew 25:21, well done, good and faithful servant. Now, for those of us who are hearing, would you express your appreciation to her right now? Thank you. Thank you, Mary Alice. We love you. We love you. We are grateful. If you have your Bibles this morning, would you grab them for just these last few minutes of chapel, and would you crank them open to John chapter 13. John chapter 13, we're going to look at that here together in just a few moments. John chapter 13. This morning here in chapel, we are starting a two-part sermon series for these final two chapels of the semester. And we've entitled this sermon series, as you heard Matt say, the Bible and the Basin. We're getting ready to send you out for the summer. You graduates, we're getting ready to send you out for good. And we want to send you out with a Bible in one hand and with a basin in the other. We want to send you out to share the truth of Christ with the world and to share the love of Christ with the world, to speak and to serve, to preach with your words and to preach with your actions, bold as a lion and gentle as a lamb. We want you to go out with the Bible in one hand and with the basin in the other. Now, I brought a book with me here this morning, grabbed it off my shelf, entitled The Three Christs of Ypsilanti. Dr. Milton Rokeach is a psychiatrist in Ypsilanti, Michigan, and in this book he tells the true story of three of his patients, three guys named Leon, Clyde, and Joseph. And each one of these three gentlemen suffered from a psychotic delusional disorder. Each one of these three guys actually thought he was Jesus Christ, thus the three Christs of Ypsilanti, Leon, Clyde, and Joseph. And so here's what Dr. Rokeach did for them. For 2 years, he had these 3 guys live together. They ate all of their meals together, lived in the same room, slept in the same room together, worked at the same job together. Every afternoon, they would have a small group therapy session together, and he hoped that by rubbing up against other people who thought that they were Jesus, that it would kind of bring them back to reality. It's kind of a messianic 12-step recovery group. Are you following me here? And he said this led to some pretty interesting conversations. Can you imagine? They're sitting around in the afternoon, small group therapy, Leon, Clyde, Joseph, Dr. Rokeach, and one of the guys would say something like this: I am the Son of God. I'm on a mission to save the world. Dr. Rokeach would say, well, how do you know that? He would say, God told me. One of the other guys would say, I never told you any such thing. Pretty funny story as you read through from time to time, but it's also a pretty sad story because by the time you get to the end of the book, you discover that Leon, Clyde, and Joseph, true story, never do come back to reality. They remain trapped in this Messiah complex, this little world of their own making, the center of which is themselves, and they continue to be convinced that they are the most important person in the world. They never do escape their Messiah complex. It's a funny story, but it's a sad story. And it's also a familiar story. Because my confession to you this morning is this: I have my own little piece of Messiah complex. The Bible word for it is pride. Maybe I'm not the only one here today. When I graduated from Ozark back in 1993, I took my first full-time ministry, preaching at a little church in Carbondale, Illinois. 80 or so, some of God's best saints at this church. And I was 23 years old, didn't know what I was doing, but I just, started to try to preach the Bible and love on folks and tell them about Jesus. And God began to bless the ministry. I mean, we were seeing people come to Christ almost every week, baptisms each Sunday. In the first 6 months, our church doubled in attendance. We were bursting at the seams. Had to go to 2 morning worship services, contact a building company. We're going to have to start building a new building. We hired the first youth minister the church had ever had. Just exciting things happening. And I remember at that 6-month mark, I was standing out in the lobby one Sunday morning after worship service, talking with a visitor. And I asked her, I said, hey, so glad you came this morning. I said, what was it that brought you to our church? Did you have a friend here? Did somebody invite you? And she said, no. She said, every day I drive by your church on my way to work, and I see those little sayings on your sign. Now, our church was located on a very busy street there in Carbondale, and out there right next to the road, we had this great big nice marquee, floodlights on it. You've seen these signs at churches before. And every Monday morning, it was my custom to go out and put a new saying for the week up on the sign. Come in for a faith lift or something corny like that. And she said every day, she said, I see those little sayings on the sign. And she said, they're so good. She said, I think about them all week long. And she said, this morning, I just got up and I thought to myself, I'm going to go to that church with those little sayings on the sign. Now, I didn't tell her that, I was the one that put the sayings on the sign. I didn't mention that to her. I just said, wow, so glad that you came. And, anything we can do for you, let us know. Hope we get to see you back. But the next morning, Monday morning, I'm kind of cracking the door in my life here a little bit. I'm sitting in my office, and I'm feeling pretty good about how things are going at church, all right? I mean, baptisms every week, churches going, 2 morning worship services, contact a building company, youth ministry. They like my sayings on the sign. Now, it was my custom to go out Monday morning and change the saying on the sign, but I'm being very confessional here. That Monday, I waited until 4 o'clock in the afternoon to go change the saying on the sign. Now, why would I do that? 4 o'clock in the afternoon, everybody was getting off of work. Busy street, lots of cars driving by, bigger audience. Are you following me here? 4 o'clock in the afternoon, I walk out the front door of the church. I got the letters for the sign underneath my arm, and I'm kind of striding out across the front yard. And as I'm walking across the front yard, all these cars zipping by, I know what all the drivers in those cars are thinking. They're thinking, why, I've heard good things are happening at that church. Well, look, that must be the dynamic young man who preaches there. He has the letters. He must be the one who puts those wise and witty sayings on the sign each week. He's the one. I know what they're thinking. And so I get out there to the sign, and I put the letters up. I step back to survey my handiwork. It looks good. This is a true story. The saying for the week was, be humble lest you stumble. Yeah. You know what's about to happen here, right? I give it the 2 thumbs up. I turned to go walk back towards the church, and as I did, I am not kidding you, I tripped over the floodlights, boom, flat on my face, right in the dirt. And as soon as I hit the ground, I just started laughing because I knew what had happened, all right? God, up in heaven, on his throne, looking down, says, angels, angels, come here, come here, come here, come here, come here. Proctor's getting too big for his britches. Watch this. Bing! All right. It's in the Bible. Pride comes before a fall. And so I got up and I dusted myself off and I laughed my way back to the front door of the church. And I knew that I had been another victim of Messiah complex. And maybe I'm not the only one here this morning that has been infected with this disease. In fact, the whole human race can struggle with pride. It was Winston Churchill who said, "We are all worms, but I do believe I am a glowworm." And maybe you've caught yourself at times thinking a little too much about yourself or thinking a little too highly of yourself. It is literally the oldest sin in the book. Genesis chapter 3, what is it in the Garden of Eden that Satan whispers to Eve? You can be like God. And he has been tempting us ever since then to think that we are more important than what we really are. The disciples of Jesus Christ had a raging case of Messiah complex. You got your Bibles open there to John chapter 13. Let me remind you of what's going on in this chapter. It's Thursday night, upper room, Last Supper. Tomorrow morning, Friday morning, will be the cross. But tonight, Thursday night, we are gathered there at the table for the Last Supper. And do you remember what the disciples were talking about there at the table? John doesn't tell us, but Luke does in his version. He says they were arguing about which one of them was the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. Now, we don't know for sure who started this argument, but yeah, we do. It had to be Peter. Am I just right? Biggest blockhead in the Bible. That's why we love the guy. Always talking, never thinking. I can so see him doing this. You know, all right, guys, greatest in the kingdom of heaven. I mean, just go ahead, give it up. It's going to be me. Let's see here. Who walked on water? Oh, yeah, that was me. And let's see here, who made the good confession? Oh, yeah, that was me too, yeah. So go ahead, concede the nomination. You know, Jesus will be king in the new kingdom, but I will be vice king. I will be greatest in the kingdom of heaven. And, you know, I'm imagining at that point, a little further down the table, James and John pipe up at that moment. And they're like, oh, yeah, whatever, Peter. Yeah, you were like so not the greatest. Yeah, you walked on water. But then what happened there, Peter? What's your name mean? Rock? You sank like a rock. Hello. Okay, yeah. You did. You made the good confession. But what did Jesus say to you just a few minutes after that? Oh, yeah. He said, get thee behind me, Satan. He called you Satan. You cannot be the greatest. Now, the two of us, James and John, sons of thunder, thank you very much. We will sit on the right hand and on the left hand of Jesus. We will be the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. A little further down the table at that point, maybe Andrew pipes in. He's like, whoa, boys, run away. Egos here. Jesus values humility. I'm obviously the most humble person in this group, so I will be the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. And on around the table it goes. They're arguing about which one of them is the greatest. And out of the corner of their eye, they can see it. Out of the corner of their eye, they can see right over here in the corner of the room, there is this pitcher of water, and there is a basin, and there is a towel. And they all know what it's there for. You know what it's there for. Hot, dusty Palestinian roads, sandaled feet. It was the job of the lowest slave in every Jewish household to wash the feet of the guests as they came in. But this night, there is no slave on duty. It's Passover. Maybe he's celebrating with his family. I don't know. But what I do know is none of them volunteer for the job. That's not my job. I'm not low man on the totem pole. I'm nobody's slave. And seated right over here is Jesus. Question, what do you do when you're the most important person in the room? Because make no mistake about it, seated right there at the table, that's the second member of the Trinity. That is the one who, from eternity past, has filled the universe with his presence, who could flick his finger and send our solar system spinning off into space. That is the Son of God. Seated there. Now, what do you do when you're the most important person in the room? Well, John chapter 13 tells us that while the disciples are arguing about who is the greatest, Jesus very quietly got up from the table and he slipped over to the corner of the room and he took off his outer garment and he picked up that towel and girded himself with the towel. That was the dress of a slave. And he poured that water into that basin. And then, this is amazing, but it is true. The Son of God got down on his knees and he began to wipe those dirty toes of Peter and James and John and Andrew and Bartholomew and Judas and all the way around the table. And when Jesus had finished and he stood back to his feet, I am sure you could have heard a pin drop in the room. And I want you to hear what Jesus says to his disciples at that moment. John chapter 13, verse 13, he says this. You call me teacher and Lord, and rightly so, for that is what I am. Now that I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also should wash one another's feet. I have set you an example that you should do as I have done for you. I have set you an example that you should do as I have done for you. Can I be honest here this morning? It is hard to follow that example when you still have a little bit of Messiah complex running through your veins. It was a few years back now, I was at a week of church camp, first and second grade week of church camp, 150 first and second graders. It was the second day of camp. I was already tired. I'm just being honest. I was a little grumpy. It was the afternoon and all the